Assalamualaikum and good evening. I hope everyone is able to stay safe. I just have received some news that some of you had contracted COVID-19. So I hope most of you are able to be safe lah. Basically, in the hopes that nothing is going to interfere with your studies, especially now that we are almost middle of the sem. So for those yang contracted tu nanti pening sikit lah macam mana dia nak continue studies dia, especially most probably dia kena under treatment, I guess, for a few weeks. I'm not sure. Most probably more than 2 weeks. So I'm not sure how their teaching and learning progresses would be affected. Of course, not to their fault, but yeah, the thing happens. And I guess what I can wish to you is stay the best that you could to be as possible, as best as possible, being safe lah from COVID. Okay, that's it. Today we are going to continue with lab 3, and the reason why I'm conducting this lab face to face rather than online rather than face to face is because it's quite an easy lab. In fact, you don't have to install anything, even though supposedly before at the start they mentioned that you need to install Spider, but due to the recent technological advancement and support by Google, you don't actually have to do that. You just need a good connection and, of course, if possible, your UiTM email to access and create account on their website lah. So for those who have already logged in to their UiTM email, then it is pretty much straightforward. Straightforward. But for those who don't, just so you know, if you intend to use your own personal email, just so you know that all your files saved, all your code will be saved on your Google Drive for that email. So let's say, for example, you're using your personal email. So the Google Drive attached to that email you will be able to extract all the coding from there. And since this is an online based software, so you can access it from anywhere, inshallah, provided there's a good connection. Okay, it's a good thing to see that some of you have already turned on the camera, which shows your proactivity. But for those who don't, please do so. Again, every class you need to turn on the camera to prove that you are doing the works and not just listening in, not doing anything. So, apa lagi nak cakap? For next week, we'll be doing face-to-face because apparently for next week, we would have to go to, where is we would have to go through lab 4, which is CST. CST is much more on communication punya aspect. I understand that you guys are power engineering, but you still have to know this. I'm not sure why, but they want you to know how to design an antenna using this CST software. So since it will require some installation, and then we'll be doing face to face in order for me to help you if you face any issues. Okay, that's it. Okay, and then if you recall at the start of the semester, I mentioned that you need to submit one for the whole experiment 1 to 5, 1 to 6 experiment. You need to submit lab sheet. The short report, and I will choose among these 6 experiment which long report you should submit. So for the other class, I've mentioned that they need to provide long report for CST. But for you, just to make sure that nobody is doing the same work and just copying and paste between each classes. So I guess I would want you to provide a long report on I believe lab 5 would be okay because yeah, lab 5 because Excel is too easy and even this lab is quite easy. So even though it's still easy for lab 5, but at the very least you will be using uh, Tinkercad. That's it. Where's the AutoCAD? Oh, this one. Okay. I'll get back to you whether it should be the long report should be in lab 5 or lab 7, not lab 6. Lab 6, lab 7 tadi tu. AutoCAD ni. Sebab AutoCAD ni is a good thing jugalah kalau lab 7. So I'll get back to you which of the two experiment I would want you to do your lab report, your long report for the lab. So I probably will be able to give you the exact decision by next week lah kot, insyaAllah. Okay. Panjang tapi macam pendek, macam senang je. We'll see. Anyhow, we'll continue with lab 3, which is on Python. So basically, what do you need Python for is for you to solve a mathematical equation. For example, later on when you do your mini project, typically students lah, they don't prefer to do mathematical equation that much for their diploma mini project. But just in case that it is, oh, banyak semut. Hold on ya. Pahal semut banyak ni. Yeah, my mind is distracted. I'm quite a bit picky about maths. I have OCD, things like that. So I have to address this quite quickly. All right. So okay, for this for your mini project, typically student won't explore so much on mathematical equation. Typically, you guys will be doing much more on hands-on project that may or may not involve apa nama Arduino lah. So, but if there is a chance that you might want to pursue that area, I would advise you to use Python rather than Matlab. Basically, these two software is typically what people would use lah, to solve mathematical equations, especially if you're using AI. So these are the two platform that you can use because they have this toolbox, what we call as toolbox. So basically toolbox, and you can imagine the whole environment where the AI, the general AI parameter that typically people will use would be there. So you just have to plug it in and define the terms. That should be it. So lagi mudah lah. Kalau rather than you recreate the whole, reinvent the whole wheel, you might as well just use the wheel and design the car, which is what people would appreciate more lah, rather than the wheel itself. So that's the same goes for Python and Matlab because for my PhD back then, Python isn't as glamour as nowadays because back then Google still is undecidedly to pursue which one lah. But apparently during the recent years development punya technology, they chose Python and therefore they've provide tons of supports lah for Python punya environment. That said, the reason why they choose Python is actually because it's easy compared to, it's easier lah, not to say easy, easier than Matlab in terms of apa nama, human interfacing. So, okay, so the objective of this lab, experiment 3, is to find optimal parameters. Optimal parameters meaning, can I highlight this? Hold on, I can't. Can I? Why can't I? I'm not sure why. Never mind. I'll just select and just highlight it. So optimal parameters, because if you recall back in your high school, you have a y equals to mx plus c, which is the linear equation, and then you have a sense of data, right? And back then, if you still if you're similar like me when I was in high school, kita punya gap age ini quite far, so I'm not sure the latest punya high school punya syllabus, but back then I have to use pen and paper, and from the plotted data, I have to draw a line and then ambil titik dua and then buatlah equation persamaan serentak untuk dapatkan y equals mx plus c. So my equation will be depending on the line that I draw on the paper. So that might not be optimal because it is prone to human error lah. Maksudnya kita tengok mana yang kita draw tu, approximately still okay. Just that if you want to be more precise, memang kena buat banyak-banyak lah. Line ni okay, angle ni sikit, tukar sikit ke angle tu. So if you move the angle quite a little bit cerun dia tinggi dia tu, if you change it quite significantly, chances are the equation will also be different. So this is where Python can help you with. They find the best representation of that angle, the best representation of that line tu, straight line tu. So nampak macam sekejap dia buat, but is actually millions of iteration of numbers yang dia dah grade tu, and then they find out okay, tu yang paling bagus. So that's where Python comes in. It's gonna help you rather than you draw and then buat persamaan serentak and then buat the next one, draw persamaan serentak sampai sejuta kali. They do it for you, which is Python lah, bukan di Google Python yang buat. So and then to use curve fitting to observe the resultant plotted graph lah. Maksudnya bila kita dah find out equation tu, Python dah find out the equation tu, then you can see it visually based on line graph lah yang dia dah plot based on optimized punya findings. Okay, so what do you need? Only your personal computer. Components is just Python, and in fact you don't have to install it. Just browse, which I'm going to show it to you in a bit. So what is Python? Python kalau bahasa Englishnya is ulas-awa, tapi the reason why it is named as it is because pencipta dia tu, founder dia tu memang hope to come up with a program language that can encapsulate tons of things. So Python ulas-awa, you can imagine dia suka ngap ni kan. So something like this lah. Python ni dia punya in the spirit of. It is basically started being developed in 1980s. 1980s is I was born in 1983. So back then dia punya computer language tu prominently was basic C, basic and apa ya. Zaman tu memang baru-barulah Steve Jobs pun baru start dengan Apple II. So back then is still early, but not as early as C or C++. C++, if I'm not mistaken, in 1950s, 1960s, the first time they debuted. So it is in current state, it is an excellent language to develop, but I just want you to know the punya drawbacks is that it is quite slow and precision. When you're talking about precision, it's about kalau titik perpuluhan tu, if I'm not mistaken, for Matlab, it can go to a 10 to the power of minus 16. Correct me if I'm wrong, nanti you can explore it later, takut saya tipu awak. The same thing goes Python, but it would be much more smaller, meaning 10 to the power of minus maybe 10 ke 9 ke 8 ke, because they want to be quite fast, because they have to interface with other platform, Java ke, Ruby ke, R2, R squared ke. So they tend to sacrifice accuracy for the sake of improving the speed, but still it wouldn't be as quick as Matlab. But if you're in the stage of prototyping or developing, it is an excellent language because it's easy to use, so that you can have the tengkorak, the skeleton, the coding skeleton, and then interface with other software. Okay, so it still performs using C and C++. So even though the syntax too looks a little bit different, but the spirit of C or C++, you can see it later. Python has offered advantages over mainstream languages. in the sense that it is open source. That means you don't have to pay for anything, even library. Even though library to being supported by Google, you don't have to pay anything. You just can use it as it is. Of course, if you want to modify it or whatever, you can claim it as a license benda ni, tapi typically it would be frowned upon lah. Yelah, you dah ambil benda free, tiba-tiba nak jual ke orang pula. Memang, ya, unless you apa nama, package it with a instrument or with a application with a robot or something like that, and then yeah, you can sell it. But the language of programming itself, if you want to sell it, you can't. People will frown upon you, and most probably you will not be able to IP protect the program. So it is free. And it is mostly Linux based. Linux ni in the world currently, I know there's tons of OS actually being developed, but the one that are prominent are Windows, Mac, Mac OS, and also Linux. So Windows dengan Mac ni proprietary, whereby Linux ni is free, open source. You can install it anywhere, anyhow, and you can interface it with any kind of OS. Okay, it's quite fast, but tak cantik lah maksudnya. For those who have like me, biasa dengan Windows or Mac, depending on your Mac, laptop or MacBook. Typically, you would see Linux ni, it is quite simple, minimalist, but the graphics, the what you call that, the interface might be quite vanilla lah, I would say, unless you modded it. And also, if you modded it, chances are it will sacrifice the quickness of the OS. So that is Linux. So Python is available to all major operating system. That means if you install Linux if you have a computer and you boot it, you have triple boot, Windows, Mac, and Linux. If you install it in your computer, chances are you will be able to use regardless of what software you are using right now. Let's say, for example, you're currently developing your code in Linux, and when you want to test it, in Windows, you can still use the same code. You don't have to modify or alter or anything to the program to make it run in Windows or Mac. Okay, so it's integratable between all the other operating system. Okay, and then we look into the mathematics part, which we're going to explore in a bit. So curve fitting is a statistical process to estimate only, not come up with an accurate representation, just estimation of a relationships between variables. X, how many changes in Y can we see once we change in X or B or A or C, for example, like that. So we want to see the relationship, whether there's a pemalar ke, there's a constant ke, we want to see. It includes many techniques for modeling and analyzing several variables. So the focus is on the relationship between dependent and independent. So in the case of linear equation, y equals to mx plus c, y is in the dependent variable. Maksudnya, any changes from x will impact y. Maksudnya, if x equals to 1, kan equation is y equals to mx plus c. Can I conteng? Kenapa tak kasi conteng? I'm not sure why. Supposedly, I'm able to conteng here, but there must be some format here that I'm unable to change it. But y equals mx plus c. So let's say m is constant, maybe 5, c is 2. So if x change 1, 5 multiplied with 1 equals to 5 plus 2, 7. And if x changed to 2, then the value of y would also, because y equals to mx plus c, right? So any changes in x will also affect y. So that means y is dependent variable, that macam anak dengan mak lah. So x is mak dia, y tu anak dia. So that means x is independent. It can be anything without influence from y, whereby dependent is y because it depends on x for it to have some value. And curve fitting can be used to infer causal relationship. That means you can conclude from the equation y equals to mx plus c that y has direct influence, x has direct influence over y. Any changes in x will affect y, but any changes in y may not affect x directly. Okay. Consider that we have collected examples of data, which we will get the data from internet later on. We'll look into the code. From the problem domain with inputs and outputs, the X is independent variable and Y is the dependent variable, like I've mentioned earlier. We don't know the form of the function. Let's say lah, awak collect data daripada your sensors, and typically it will be scattered lah across over the time, all across the time, according to your changes. So waktu mula-mula dapat tu, typically you wouldn't know the relationship between Y and X. You only know there is some influence, but you need to prove it in terms of figures and numbers. So that is why we use curve fitting, because it approximates the relationship between Y and X. And of course, using AI, which basically what Python is doing, at the bottom nanti kita tengok, dia akan try to solve it as quickly as possible to give you the best representation of the data punya movement tu. Okay. So for this, it advises you to watch this link, YouTube link, but I expect you to watch it on your own time before we start the lab. This is called Prelab punya preparation. So I hope most of you have already watched this, but I understand student biasalah last minute baru buat kerja. And but try to have a look at it. It's not that critical, but it's more on just letting you know how to use Google Colab, which is what we are going to use for our Python lab today. So you can have a look. For those who have already, congrats. So we can continue with part A. Okay, so for this part, I have to open my Google Chrome, is it? This is lab download. Have I opened it? I think I have. Yeah, new tab. Flipping. All right, this one. Okay, let me arrange the windows so that it looks clearer. Okay, let me arrange this so that this be. So what you should do I think this one kita fokus kat sini lah. Contohnya saya betulkan balik. Fokus macam ni, okay. Okay, so what you if you want to start with part A, what you should do is type in Google Colab, tu je, and then enter, choose the first one, Google Colab. So I've already logged in to my UiTM account email. So as you can see, there's my profile picture there. So once I clicked it in, I'll only be able to see this section here. So I have to delete this. Can I delete this to make sure that we are on the same page? No, better not. Can I delete this? Don't know. I'm not sure how can I delete it, but never mind lah. For those of you who, because I've already done my part A with the other groups, so and it's associated with my link profile link. So as you can see, it's automatic save, so you don't have to press save anytime soon. It will automatically save it for you. But I guess we'll start with new notebook so that all of you are on the same page. So this will depends on your internet connection. If it's fast, you'll be able to see it quite immediately, like I am right now, almost immediately. To differentiate between each of these notebook ni bukan laptop notebook ni like a profile a working environment lah that you have set up for Python. So for this part, let's say I put here part A lab 3. I use capital letter to differentiate between this notebook and the other one that they have done. But for you, it's up to you. You want to put small letter, small cap, it's up to you. The name is just the name for you to find it later on. So once you have filled that, it's automatically being saved. And under .ipynb, what does it mean is Internet Python notebook file. So that means you can't open it anywhere else except Python punya environment lah. So if you have Spider, then most probably you'll be able to open this. Okay. So where are we right now? Okay, so we are doing part A, linear curve fitting. So to make sure that we are, orang kata susun cantik, kemas, kita taruh ni lah import heading ni on the text. So in order for you to add text, you just press either plus code or plus tag. So I want to plus text. And the beauty of the simplicity of using this Google Colab is you can move this to suit your requirement. Like for me, I want to put the text at the first page before we start our code. So I just click this or Control MK. So it will be put, it will be apa, ataupun tekan arrow ni lah, atas ataupun bawah if you want to arrange it. So I want to put it upstairs. So I put here at the topmost part of the coding, and then escape. Now you'll be able to see the text. So this is not the code. This is just a text to label the section of the code. For C programming, you'll be, it's similar to code apa? Apa nama tu? Comment. It's similar to comment. If you recall, nak buat C programming, if you want to comment, you have to put slash and asterisk or double slash for Arduino. So for this, just text, but you can also put double slash lah if you want to put. So since we are learning this code, I advise you to type all this because I believe in the future, if you're still working in electrical engineering, but more on apa nama computer punya section, chances are you will be interfacing Python. So it's quite an investment, knowledge investment that you can make to understand how to code Python. It's very simple je. So for me, I prefer for a new language that I'm not familiar with to type everything. So you will bound to be, it will result you to be making stupid mistakes, typo mistakes, but in the long term, you'll be more familiarized with the syntax that you need to use so that whenever you want to code, you don't have to refer to the manual lab or anything. You can just type it in easier. So for me, I have vested interest in learning Python for my research. So I tend to try to type. The same goes for you. Since you are still young, you don't know where you'll be working yet, might as well spend the time learning coding. Because I believe your challenges from now on is more on understanding apa nama coding-coding ni lah. Memang nampak remeh but don't don't apa nama melekehkan programming. I know some of you have fears trying to learn coding, but once you have hit some coding, it's actually not that hard. It's quite simple actually, as long as you understand. Dia macam language lah. The more you practice, the more you understand, the more you find it easier. Macam English kan, the more you practice. Okay, so make sure you typed it in, or if you want to Control C, Control V, it's up to you. But for me, I like to type it in. So once you have typed, as you can see, it's much simpler where compared to C programming, you have to have semicolon at the end of this. And you don't actually and the syntax is much more convenient. For example, import from rather than printf, scanf, apa lagi? If I'm not mistaken, for C programming, C++, it will be much more a hassle. So for this one, it's almost similar to English punya words. So senang lah. And for this kind of coding, macam C programming, C programming, you have to code every single line before you'll be able to run and see the result, if there is an error or not. So your troubleshooting experience may be quite tedious lah, I would say. But for Python, Matlab, and other advanced punya programming, typically you can actually run it section by section. For example, import heading section, I just want to see that if there is any problem with my typing, with the code typing that I've just done just now. I can just click run on this. If there is an error, it will be showed here. Sorry, at the bottom here, but so far it's connecting to the Google server. Let's see. Oh, it takes some time. When I'm using it just this morning at my house, it's quite almost laju dalam masa berapa seconds je. Macam ni, 1 second, and there's no error. I got a green tick. That means my code is correct lah. There's no typo error. There's no error in any kind of a syntax that I'm using and any kind of file that I'm using. So what does this do? Basically, you're importing the library of numpy, numpnp, and matplotlib, and plt. So whenever you want to plot something, you have to use this command, plt. And this is the source file. And this is basically, this is the source file for you to conduct the AI. And pandas is basically the source file of the data that we are going to use today, which is read CSV. This data is actually from, if I'm not mistaken, GitHub. So if you hover over it, you'll be able to find the source, which is, can we see it? I don't think so. Never mind. But you can just Google read.csv Python. You'll be able to see the source file of the data. But for now, we're just importing it. We are just trying to get some data for us to play around. So there's no critical needs for us to trace down the accuracy of the data. We can just use it. Okay, so then we move on to load data set, and it even so the data set is from GitHub. Okay. So longly.csv the name is. So we start with plus text. Again, saya bab coding, even though ni saya suka kemas, so saya akan label accordingly lah. Okay, so for this one, I don't prefer to write it up, but it's just a matter of apa nama? Website dia. So might as well just copy and paste to avoid any typo error. Macam ni, nampak? So senang terus masuk. And then I'll type the other words because that is syntax for Python. Up to you. If you still want to copy, rasa malas boleh buat. And as you can see, for read CSV, once you have put it here, if you type, let's say for example, read CSV again. So Python come up with this suggestion, the variable that you want to use. So once you have typed it in, Python will restore it in its temporary memory, so that as you write along the code, they will suggest it to you. So if you want to use this and it's correct, the one that you want to use, just press tab. So now it will be able. So you can avoid typo error. Okay, so and if you put a close bracket, the Python will automatically close it for you. That's why I said Python is much easier for us to use during development stage. Everything is almost automatic to help you avoid silly mistakes like typo or whatever. So I continue with the code, DataFrame.values. I like coding actually because I invested quite significantly on my keyboard, mechanical keyboard. And typing on it is okay, batuk on mic bagus tu.
Saya tarik tak nampak, saya
Type tak nampak.
tak
Firdaus
terang.
tak nampak saya. Dia
No.
cakap nama saya.
Okay, nampak dah sikit.
Okay, so
Better.
what I'm typing here, you don't actually need to be critical. Everything is being written in your lab manual. So try to open your lab manual. Try to look at there in case I type wrongly. So at least you won't repeat my mistakes. So you can just avoid my mistakes lah. Might as well you refer to the original source, which is your lab manual. So for this one, why my keyboard doesn't register ni. I guess my switch nak kena service ni. Plot.figure 6 and 4 and plot scatter. Okay, done. So the code might seems a bit overwhelming, tapi sebenarnya senang je. It's just a matter of you plotting the data. Once you load the data, you plot it so that we'll be able to see what does the data is trying to tell us. So, like I said, you can just run compile by clicking the play button here. So you don't have to write the whole code to see what error that you'll get. You can do it section by section to be more efficient. So if you press play, so you can see this is the data that you have extracted from the GitHub website. So this is the data that we are going to play around today. Okay. So how you, if I'm not mistaken, you need to save this data because you need to include it in your lab sheet. So for me, just save image as lah, senang. Ataupun the other way is to use your snip card and just snip the section load data set ni would be also be more efficient lah. Nampak coding, nampak data dia macam mana. Okay, any issues so far regarding this section? Ada siapa ada problem?
No, sir.
Okay, because just this morning ada one of the students unable to produce this graph, basically because I guess the internet problem, I guess. She pressed this play and then it takes some time to complete, but before the run simulation can be completed, she directly pressed the other one. So might be some confusing there lah. So I advise her to delete and then recreate new one. It's just a simple copy and paste. Kalau dah type okay lah. But if nobody has any issue, we'll continue. Make sure everyone got this plot data. This will need to be included in your lab sheet. Okay. So we continue with to define the linear curve. So we put here text first because we want to properly label so that easier for us to find or capture the progress of the lab. Okay, then plus code because now we want to code according to the lab manual. So they put there x, m, and also c because again the equation is y equals to mx plus c. So we have x, we have m, and we have c to give us y. So here y is objective, The name is objective. So if you press enter, it should give, you could type return and then m multiply with x plus p. Okay, make sure if you use here lower capital letters, you also put here lower capital letters. Again, programming ni, even though ada AI apa semua, they need to be literally exact. Capital letter, lower capital letter, memang akan ada effect. So we've done this. So you can try to run it. This is basically your equation. You define the equation that you want to use to solve this relationship between this data. So we run it first to see if there's an error. So as you can see, there are error here. In my case, invalid syntax x, m, and c. Why? X. Oh yeah, I forgot. I missed this double dot there. Still ni. Oh, okay. letak ni dulu. Okay, so now no error. Apparently, if you miss this semicolon, it will put the return mx plus c ni as a new text, meaning a new instruction. If you haven't put it double dot, if you put double dot, then this equation is actually under definition of objective here. Because if you just put it like this, then you enter, if you can see. Sorry, let me rewrite this. Okay, if I just press enter, look, it falls under a new line. But if I put here double dot, then this will be the function, the element of the function objective here. Okay, so if we run this, then it should be properly addressed. Okay, and then we proceed with to generate curve fitting, which is letting AI of Google AI, which is the params covariance. Mana saya punya ni? Ni. Params covariance ni kita gunakan AI daripada, not so much AI lah, just algorithm from Google to try as best as it could to find out the optimal parameters for y equals to mx plus c yang kita dah define kat sini. Right? So we typed it, we filed it under, generate curve fitting to data x and data y. Okay, and then we plus the code, which since we have two variables that is constant, we put there m dengan c lah. M dengan c memang constant, takkan berubah. If you recall persamaan serentak y equals to mx plus c, finding linear equation, m dengan c memang constant, so we just use it. So params covariance will try to solve this equation, which is optimize dot curve underscore fit. So dia dah suggestkan underscore fit, so kita tekan je lah tab, and then we type in objective, which is the output, and then x data, which is the x-axis, then y data, which is the y-axis. So we press play to run, or control enter to make sure there's no error. So now no error. Then we move on to plot curve fitted data. Okay, so plus code, which is quite substantial coding there, but I like to type it in again to make myself familiar, even though I've already done this in the morning. Repetition equals so Lee Chong Wei tu tak jadi juara dunia sebab dia bukan sebab dia berpraktis 1-2 kali je, dia praktis banyak kali. The same goes for anything that we want to do in our life lah. Practice makes perfect. So practice lah typing ni sebanyak mungkin. X data, Y data, and then label as data. Plot. X data. Active. X. Oh. Okay. X data. Then you have M variables and C variable, and then comma, label as the fitted function. Seems tedious, tapi it's good to type. I liked it. And then make sure you put in legend so that we'll be able to understand what has just been plotted. So put the location, and then plot.show. Okay. So once you have typed this in, you can just run it, make sure there's no error, and there you'll be able to find the resultant plot by your Google AI, or basically Google algorithm, which is the optimized curve fit ni. Optimized curve fit as the apa ni lah, param covariance punya subset punya algorithm. So even though it seems like this is in 1 or 2 seconds, but that's the beauty of using computer lah. Instead of you, okay, kalau saya waktu saya mula-mula buat apa persamaan serentak ni, I would draw somewhere in the middle, but the result will not be optimized lah, because it may not be representing the whole dynamics, or maybe you will draw somewhere here, this straight line here. So based on the output obtained, the algorithm decide that this is actually the most optimal plot line that actually represent the dynamics due to the negligible error that it can get at the output. So that is what it meant by finding the optimal curve fit. Okay. Of course, this is the case of YMX plus C lah. If you're trying to use elliptical, which is after this, apa namanya, quadratic equation, nanti lagi pening lah kalau pakai kertas atau paper sendiri. Anybody has any issue to reach this point? Because you need to put the output here as your proof. No issue?
No, sir.
No, sir.
So if there's no issue, make sure you record this result and put it in your lab report, lab sheet. Okay, so once we have plot the curve fit data, now we moved on to finding the optimal equation parameters. And we plus code, which is for C programming, you have to use printf, but for for Python it's just print, although nampak macam negligible but trust me, we're gonna help you with the other stuff lah, Python ni. So we'll type the equation so that it will show it to us in the sense that we understand. So why, if you recall C programming, if you want to print f, you have to put the titik perpuluhan tu, floating value to the variable, attach another floating value or integer value to the variable, then you'll be able to see it according to the susunan. So basically what we are doing right now is susun the printf too, so that it reflect the code, the equation that we understand, y equals to mx plus c. So this will be f, this will be mx, and this will be plus c. And it will refer to variable m and also c. Yep. Error tak? Let's see. Nope. Okay, so I got the equation correctly lah, which is 0. Why is it 0? Kenapa ada F? I missed this, sorry. This should be the result. Tadi saya tambah F depan ni. I'm sorry. So this is mx plus c. C tak payah kali dengan x. So as you can see there, the m is actually 0.48488 multiplied with x plus 838067, which is c for that code, for that equation. So you have to record this as a result of your lab work. This is individual. I noticed today, yesterday, some of you, or is it today? Some of you had submitted late, so marks will be deducted for your lab sheet. You have to remember this subject, your personal lab report too, your individual lab report too, and also the long report dictates 73% of your carry mark. So please take this report submission appropriately. This eat a huge chunk of your carry mark. As long kalau for me lah, if I were in your place, untuk lab-lab senang macam ni, habis ini terus buat, terus submit. Of course, if I didn't upload the link yet, then there's a problem for you to submit lah. That's my fault lah. Tapi typically I will update it normally around Friday, Saturday, because normally throughout the week I have other issues that I need to attend to. So just make sure to submit it once I upload the link lah. Jangan tunggu last minute. Anybody has any issues with this part A? This is just part A. Siap, part A. We've completed part A. Any issues?
No, sir.
Senang je kan? Okay, so if no issues, we'll continue with part B so that lab ni boleh siap cepat lah. I expect pun memang lab ni macam this morning, I'm able to finish lab 3 in just 1 hour and 1.5 hour je. So the rest of the tu you boleh buat your lab report lah ataupun buat other works. So part B is polynomial curve fitting, or yang kita belajar quadratic dulu ke apa nama tu? Saya lupa dah. Yang ax squared plus bx plus c. So the same things lah here. So ax squared bx plus c. So the same procedures as part A, except yang this section here, which is define objectively. So my advice is open a new notebook. Hold on ya. Okay, name it. Oh, itulah gunanya. Sebab tu, kenapa aku buang? Name it part B, lab 3. Okay, so we start with text. So the same thing goes with this section. So just dah buat tu, then you can just copy it lah. Sebab buat per type banyak kali kan. So for me, on this section here, you can just copy and paste to avoid any typo because we have already typed it in. Of course, if you want to practice typing again, you can just type it in. But for me, since I've already done 3 times today, might as well I just copy it. Okay, and then plus text, load data set, and then this data. So the same process, you don't need to change anything at this stage. Make sure you get the same output. Okay, and then plus text. This one you need to change, but the same part section, so you can just type in the text, but this section here will be different. So what you should do is to observe what I'm trying to do right now lah. So as you can see for part B, they have X, A, B, and C, whereby previously part A, only X, M, and C. Now you have X, A, B, and C. So first and foremost, do the simplest one first, which is define, which is defining A, B, and C as the variable that we're going to use. And then the equation. So as you can see, the equation is a little bit different than previously, but it's already been given to us. So you can just type in A multiply with X plus B multiply with X squared. So this is X squared, X dua kali. X kuasa 2, sorry. And then plus C. Since it's already been given there, you can either type it in or you can just alter like I did lah. I copy paste and then alter. So press play to make sure there's no issue. So for me, there's no issue there with my code. And then press text to move on to the next stage, which is to generate curve fitting to fit data. And since we have X and Y, it's still applicable lah. Still X and Y. Input dia hanya X and Y, tapi yang lain-lain tu constant tu That one we have to find. So okay, this one also needs some modification since we have 3 inputs. So any M and C that you found, basically the previous one using M and C, now you have to change it to A, B, and C. But this section here, we are still plotting according to X and Y axis, so you can just maintain it. And this section here is just the algorithm of the Python Google server, so you can just use it as a library. So then press play to make sure there's no error. So as you can see, there's no error in my case. Then we move on. Okay, so before we proceed, anybody has any issue? Sorry, saya laju sangat. Laju sangat saya tahu. So if you have any question or want me to wait for you, I'll wait. It seems that we are about to have a rain this evening.
So I have an issue, sir.
Yeah. What kind of issue do you have?
I'm copy paste the code for the dataset from part A, and then when I paste it at part B, it causes an error.
Can you show it to me? What kind of error that you've seen?
Can you see my screen, sir?
Yeah. So
Here.
Longly is the I don't see any error there.
Because I'm already copying it from the part A.
Hold on, yeah. Let me double check. 4, 6. Shouldn't be any issue there. Everything is according to the ni. Okay, tengok. Can you see your part A? Is it has there anything has been running? Can you go down? Maybe there's something running or still haven't finished. So everything has been run okay. Open back part lab 3. That part.
Should I run it here first?
Yeah, you need to run the first block first. Then only
Okay.
it will be able. Again, remember coding, it's flowing from top to bottom. You can't run the bottom part if you don't run the first part.
Thank you, sir.
Welcome. Anybody else have any issue? Okay, if none, I guess I'll proceed with the next step, which is okay, this one. Sorry, plus text lah. Plus text, so that now we can plot the data to see the optimal solution that they have counted using a polynomial equation. So previously it was linear equation, now polynomial. Since we'll be using different sets of data, now we have to change this. So any M and C, you have to change to A, B, and C. Make sure you understand why we change it to A, B, and C. Again, I know as a student myself, when a teacher when the lecturer is teaching, sometimes my mind is off somewhere else. And when the lecturer goes by too fast, chances are we'll miss out the detail of you there. So I might need to repeat myself. But supposedly, like I said, make sure you understand why I told you to change any MC that you found in the code into A, B, and C. Okay, so now I've already done this. Press enter to see if there's any error. Okay, none, and I'm able to get the data. So this is the output, the best optimal curve fitting based on polynomial equation, which means now you have a curve. Previously in A, you have a straight line because you're using y equals to mx plus c. Y equals to mx plus c. But for lab 3, since you're using polynomial, I'm not sure polynomial quadratic sama ke? Correct me if I'm wrong. So if dipanggil polynomial, so I call it polynomial. So the polynomial equation is like this. So that's why you are having a curve instead of a straight line. Okay, make sure you capture this in your brain understanding, because you need to describe to me why you got this in your lab report. Okay, so kenapa tak ada sini? Silap. Stacks. Okay. So moving on, we go to the next step, which is to get the equation, which is finding the optimal parameters to get the quantification of the numbers. So plus code. Then just type this in. Again, remember, now any kind of M and C that you found, you have to change it to A, B, and C. Okay, and then press enter. So there's an error there. Not all are converted. Oh, sorry. Since you are using a squared x plus a x squared b x plus c. So this equation need also to be changed. This is y mx plus c. Okay, sorry. So since the equation is, look at your lab manual, a multiplied by x. Okay, you have already done that. A multiplied by x, and then plus b multiplied with x squared. So now percent 0.5f, which is b, multiply with x squared. So now x squared plus c. So you'll get your equation, the polynomial equation at the end of it, which is this is a to 3.25443, and b is minus 0.01170 x squared, and then minus 155.02783. So as you can see, this lab is quite easy. We finished it in less than 10 minutes, especially part B. But for part A, since we are just orang kata bertatih, take some time an hour, but still doesn't require the full 4 hours that was allocated to us today. That said, I hope you understand the difference between part A and part B, where part A is more on linear relationship, mx plus c, and part B is polynomial, ax plus bx squared plus c. Any question?
Sir, can I have a
Yeah.
look at the last step for find the optimal parameters for part B?
This one.
Yeah.
I think I can zoom it in. Hold on. Yeah, 200. Right.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Remember, I'm sekarang ni saya tengah swap awak. But I will not swap. I expect to see your processing at the end of your lab report nanti. Kenapa saya tambah tu, kenapa saya buat ni, kenapa awak buat tu, kenapa awak buat ni. So I expect some processing being done by your brain. I'm feeding you the techniques, but I'm expecting you to churn out your understanding at the end of it, in your lab sheet. So for me, that's how PNP should be done. That means you got the solution, but how? But you need to answer yourself how, why, and where, and when. So any kind of subject, be it you working nanti later on, be it you, kalau nak cepat naik pangkat, amalkan menjawab what, where, why, and how every single task that you do. InsyaAllah lajulah awak naik pangkat nanti. I don't have a master's. I have diploma, degree, and then terus jump PhD. So diploma memang zaman gelap, enjoy je kerja. Degree, I start to bukan process, I digest information yang I get and allows me to graduate in first class. Even though diploma cukup makan je lepas, almost fail. And for PhD, memang I practice, digest and be more matured in my daily life to enable me to graduate PhD without any kind of masters or training. It's just a matter of you incorporating answering 5W, 4W, 1H. Why, where, when, and how dalam your daily life. In fact, most of yang overachievers that I know, that I personally knew, yang kerja Petronas tak sampai 2 tahun, 3 tahun dah naik sini engineer, tu agak susah sebenarnya tu. Is because they practice conclusion at the end of the day. At the end of the day, after dia dah buat kerja, dia akan write down what are the things that they have done and what are the things that they have learned. So that benda tu melekat dalam otak. I didn't practice that. I'm not that overachievers lah. I'm just more on emotionally stable punya person lah. Tak nak gaduh-gaduh, tak nak pening-pening. So malas lah senang cerita. So saya sampai tahap ni je lah. But for you, since you're still young, might as well try your best lah to achieve whatever that you want to achieve by incorporating tu lah tadi tu. What, where, how, and why. And I want to see that in your lab sheet. Tapi saya malas pun, I'm on my way to come to have IR. Nak dapat IR bukan senang even though my IR isn't as great as those yang power engineering punya macam korang ni. Kalau korang nak dapat IR, korang dapat chop bulat Yang mana kalau korang chop, you will be paid handsomely based on your chop punya approval tu. Whereby saya kalau chop tak ada siapa pandang pun. Tapi to get that IR, I still have to go to training, I have to come up with a report, I have to present and whatnot. And this applies not to just boys, girls pun boleh juga. Ada ramai IR perempuan yang, in fact, when I went to meeting dengan SO back then, if I'm not mistaken. Oh no, Selamba. When I was working in subcon of Petronas, I had been tasked to install pagar system. Bukan pagar rumah, pagar is alarm system dekat platform. When I went to Selamba for the meeting there, the person who are in charge of all the yang memang nampak knowledge dia deep lah, is yang level-level makcik perempuan yang level makcik ni. Memang kalau ada cerita tu berisi lah. So perempuan janganlah pandang diri tu macam, alah aku habis belajar ni nak kahwin je, nak duduk rumah je, janganlah. Zaman dah berubah. Zaman saya 2 orang kena 2 orang kerja, zaman awak tak tahulah nanti macam mana. Sesilah 2 orang kena buat 2 kerja. Ni inflation, challenges zaman korang lain daripada zaman mak bapak korang, zaman saya. Okay, so any issues? Kalau tak ada, kita proceed dengan discussion. Discuss on linear and polynomial curve fitting error. So what type of error that you are able to see based on this? Ni you have to do your own research. You have to process yourself. I can't explain it to you, nor would I want to. Zaman awak Google at your fingertips, or maybe just rather than looking at books, now you can just Google. So try to Google what are the error that you are able to see in this plotting, and discuss on how SciPy is being used to curve fit a different set of data or set of observations. So how it is being used. Again, you have to process this yourself, and I want to see it. Okay, in the conclusion, you discovered how to use curve fitting in Python. So the curve fitting involves finding the optimal parameters to a function that maps examples of input and output. So basically, you are learning on how to use curve fitting. But the gist of it is more on how to understand to use Python, basically to introduce to Python. So as you can see, yes, the code is a bit lengthy, tapi it's actually, if you divided it over each section here, it's actually quite clear. Kalau zaman saya belajar coding dulu, ni import okay, saya boleh buat macam ni lah. Zaman saya belajar coding dulu, let me copy and paste it first so that you know the challenges that I faced when I did my PhD, when I first doing my research on machine learning using Matlab. So rupa data tu lebih keluar. Bukan nak pergi bangga pun, no. Lebih kepada to see how kalau saya boleh buat, chances are you too can do it. I'm not that clever. I'm not that gifted in coding. When I code, I still need to use some reference. Adalah lecturer dekat Shah Alam tu. For those yang ada lepas ni maybe continue with your degree. Ada maybe kenal lah Dr. Ihsan, IR Dr. Ihsan, dah PM lah saya. Dia, when I did my research with him, bukan dengan dia, saya bekerja dengan dia lah, saya tanya dia banyak. Dia code, isap rokok tu macam ni, tu tangan sebelah, tangan gedug-gedug, memang gifted lah coding. Itu electrical engineer, I'm not sure kalau CS, computer science punya coder lagi lah, I think level macam kalau siapa main StarCraft tu, siapa yang tengok main StarCraft tu, for those StarCraft tu yang Korean apa semua tu, tengok macam mana dia main, kata. I think macam tu lah kot. Diorang, sorry saya gamer lah, tapi tak adalah gifted sangat. Anyhow, this is how I learn my coding waktu I did my PhD. Ni pendek ni. I'm using Narex algorithm, machine learning. Typically, if I print out the whole code, it would take at least 5 paper continuous with font of 10. Kalau words tu 10 lah kot. Ni font berapa ni? Ni 11. Okay lah. Tapi saya dah zoom in. So nampak pendek. Tapi for me, if I use font 10, I would need 5 paper back to back punya code. And that is when I first step into coding. And Alhamdulillah, it take me not more than 1 whole week lah for me to understand. So you guys have it easier. I'm not trying to bring you down. It's more on for you to know that it is achievable. Kenapa hilang pula saya punya tu tadi? Sorry. Matlab. Bukan Matlab. Collaboratory. Alright. Okay. So we have reached at the end of our session today. If you have any question, please ask. If not, then we end our session today lah with Surah Al-Fatihah, Surah Wal-As dan Tasbih Kifarah. Okay. Thank you for your time. Have a great rest of the day. Again, if you have any question, please ask. If not, you can reach me after the class or whenever that you feel like it. I'll try my best to attend to your question. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
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 Stay safe, everyone.
Salam. Be safe, everyone. Yeah.
Sir?